The city park was alive with the sounds of laughter, distant chatter, and the rhythmic hum of bicycle wheels on gravel paths. It was a sunny afternoon, with golden rays filtering through the canopy of trees, casting playful shadows across the well-worn benches. Among the scattered groups of joggers and families, a small golden puppy sat tied to a bench with a frayed red leash. Its wide, innocent eyes darted from face to face, its tiny tail wagging nervously. The pup's posture suggested a mixture of excitement and unease, as if waiting for someone it desperately missed. Unnoticed by the crowd, a man lingered near the edge of the park, his hood pulled low to conceal his face. His movements were subtle, deliberate, and predatory. As he scanned the bustling scene, his gaze locked onto the unsuspecting puppy. A sly smile tugged at the corners of his mouth, and his hands twitched in anticipation. The man's disheveled clothing and hurried steps didn't attract attention. He was just another figure blending into the park's chaos. The thief approached the puppy, crouching down to study it more closely. The little dog tilted its head, its ears perked up as if curious about the stranger. A moment passed before the man acted swiftly, unhooking the leash with a single, practiced motion and cradling the puppy in his arms. The dog whimpered softly, but its sound was drowned out by the cacophony of the park. Nearby, a canine unit rested under the shade of a tree, its handler sipping coffee from a thermos. The German shepherd's keen eyes flicked to the thief, its ears twitching at the subtle disturbance in the air. Unlike the parkgoers, the canine recognized something wasn't right. Its sharp instincts honed from years of training. The dog's muscles tensed as it focused on the man walking briskly away with the stolen puppy. This was no ordinary park visit, and the thief had no idea what he'd just walked into. As the canine unit prepared to act, an extraordinary chain of events was about to unfold, one that would leave the entire park in stunned silence. Officer Megan Hayes had always considered her canine partner, Titan, more than just a working dog. The sleek, black and tan German shepherd had been her partner for 3 years, during which they'd built a bond forged through trust, countless hours of training, and shared moments of danger. Titan wasn't just a dog, he was her protector, her confidant, and in many ways, her best friend. On this particular day, the duo had decided to take a short break from their routine patrol, enjoying the calm of the park. Megan leaned against a tree, sipping her coffee, while Titan lay at her feet, his nose twitching as he sniffed the air. The park was usually a quiet place, a haven from the chaos of the city, but Titan never completely relaxed. His sharp eyes constantly scanned the environment, his ears swiveling at the slightest noise. Today was no exception. Just as Megan was beginning to unwind, Titan's posture changed. He stood up abruptly, his ears pricked, and his eyes locked on something across the park. Megan noticed immediately. "What is it, boy?" she murmured, setting her coffee aside. Titan didn't respond with his usual playful nudge or wag of the tail. Instead, he emitted a low, guttural growl that sent a chill down Megan's spine. Following Titan's gaze, Megan spotted a man walking briskly toward the park's exit, cradling a small golden puppy in his arms. Something about the man's hurried movements and the uneasy way he glanced over his shoulder caught her attention. She scanned the area, looking for someone who might have lost the dog but saw no one in distress. "Let's go, Titan," she said, her voice firm. Without hesitation, Titan moved into action, staying close to Megan's side as they began to follow the man. The German shepherd's keen instincts had never failed her before, and she trusted his judgment implicitly. Meanwhile, the thief quickened his pace, weaving through the park's pathways. The stolen puppy squirmed in his arms, letting out soft whimpers that betrayed its discomfort. "Quiet!" the man hissed, tightening his grip. His plan had seemed flawless: snatch the dog, sell it quickly, and disappear. But now, with every step, he felt an inexplicable weight pressing down on him, as though unseen eyes were watching his every move. Unbeknownst to him, those eyes belonged to Titan, who was closing the distance with every passing second. Megan maintained a steady pace, her heart racing as she assessed the situation. Her mind raced with questions. Was this man simply returning a lost dog, or was there something more sinister at play? The latter seemed increasingly likely, as she noticed the man glance nervously in their direction. Suddenly, the man broke into a run. The abruptness of his movements sent a ripple of unease through the park. Bystanders turned their heads, some pausing mid-conversation to watch as Megan and Titan sprang into action. "Stop!" Megan shouted, her authoritative voice cutting through the park's noise. "Police, stop where you are!" But the thief didn't stop. Instead, he darted toward the park's edge, heading for a narrow alleyway that led into the city streets. Megan's adrenaline surged as she sprinted after him, Titan a blur of motion at her side. The German Shepherd's focus was unshakable, his powerful legs propelling him forward like a missile locked onto its target. The chase was on. As the thief reached the alley, he stumbled over a loose cobblestone, nearly dropping the puppy. The small dog let out a yelp, its eyes wide with fear. Ignoring the growing commotion behind him, the man pushed forward, his breathing labored as he clutched the puppy tighter. His plan was unraveling, and he knew it. But desperation drove him forward, blind to the fact that his pursuers were closing in. Megan rounded the corner just in time to see Titan surge ahead, his muscular frame a blur of black and tan. "Get him, Titan!" she commanded. The K9 launched into action, his speed unmatched as he closed the gap between himself and the fleeing man. The thief didn't stand a chance. With a calculated leap, Titan latched onto the man's arm, his powerful jaws holding firm but controlled. The thief screamed, dropping the puppy in his panic. The small dog landed safely on the ground, immediately scampering toward Megan, who knelt to scoop it up. "Good boy, Titan," Megan praised, her voice steady despite her pounding heart. She reached for her handcuffs as Titan maintained his grip on the thief, who was now trembling and shouting incoherently. Within moments, Megan had the man restrained, her years of training guiding her every move. Bystanders began to gather at the alley's entrance, their murmurs a mix of astonishment and relief. A woman stepped forward, tears streaming down her face as she pointed to the golden puppy. "That's my dog," she cried. "I thought I'd lost him forever." Megan handed the puppy to the woman, who clutched it to her chest, her gratitude evident in her tearful smile. Titan released the thief on Megan's command, sitting obediently at her side as she secured the man for transport. As the commotion settled and the stolen puppy was safely reunited with its owner, Megan felt a wave of relief wash over her. Titan stood beside her, his chest heaving from the chase, but his expression was as composed as ever. The bystanders who had gathered began to disperse, some offering words of praise, others snapping photos of Titan as he stood tall and proud. Megan, however, kept her focus on the thief, who now sat slumped against the wall, cuffed and seething with anger. Just as she was about to call for backup, the woman who owned the puppy approached, still clutching the trembling dog to her chest. Her voice was shaky but insistent. "Officer, you have no idea what you just prevented." Megan turned her attention to the woman, her brows furrowing. "What do you mean? Was he targeting you specifically?" The woman hesitated, her eyes darting to the thief, who was glaring at her with a venomous expression. "Yes," she admitted in a whisper, her voice thick with emotion. "But it's not just about the puppy. He wasn't stealing for money. He's been stalking me." The revelation hit Megan like a ton of bricks. Stalking cases were always complex, filled with nuances that often made them difficult to address quickly. Megan's gaze shifted to the thief, who smirked in a way that sent a chill down her spine. "Is this true?" she demanded, her voice sharp and commanding. The man shrugged, his cocky demeanor betraying no remorse. "She's exaggerating," he muttered, though the venom in his tone suggested otherwise. "I just wanted the dog." Megan's instincts told her there was more to the story. She turned back to the woman, who now looked visibly shaken. "Let's step aside," Megan said gently, guiding her a few feet away. "Tell me everything." The woman took a deep breath, her fingers absently stroking the puppy's soft fur as she began to explain. "I've seen him around my apartment building for weeks. At first, I thought it was a coincidence, but then he started following me whenever I walked the dog. He even tried talking to me once, asking strange questions about where I live and if I'm usually alone. It was terrifying." Megan nodded, her jaw tightening. "Did you report this to the police?" "I was going to," the woman replied, her voice trembling. "But today when I saw him in the park, I thought maybe I was overreacting. Then he grabbed Max." She paused, holding the puppy closer. "That's when I realized I wasn't safe." Megan felt her blood boil as she processed the information. The thief wasn't just a petty criminal. He was a threat, one that had escalated to a level that could no longer be ignored. She walked back to the man, who was now slouching against the wall with an air of defiance. "You're in deeper trouble than you realize," Megan said, her tone icy. "This isn't just theft, it's stalking and harassment. And now it's on record." The man's smirk faltered for the first time. "You can't prove anything," he snapped, though the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes betrayed him. Megan crouched down to meet his gaze. "Oh, I don't need to. We have witnesses. Your actions today. And if you've been stalking her, I'm sure there's evidence to back it up. Do yourself a favor. Don't make this worse." At that moment, Titan let out a low growl, standing firm by Megan's side. The sound seemed to drain what little bravado the man had left. He shifted uncomfortably, his shoulders slumping in defeat. Megan straightened up, pulling out her radio to call for backup. As she waited for a response, the woman approached hesitantly. "Thank you, officer," she said, her voice filled with genuine gratitude. "You and your dog saved us." Megan gave a small smile, reaching down to pat Titan's head. "It's what we do, and we'll make sure he doesn't bother you again." Just as Megan finished her call, one of the bystanders approached, holding up his phone. "Excuse me, officer," the man said nervously. "I got the whole thing on video, him taking the dog and you chasing him down. If it helps, I can send it to you." Megan's eyes widened. "That would be extremely helpful, thank you." The man nodded, quickly sharing the footage before hurrying off. Megan reviewed the video briefly, noting how it clearly captured the thief's actions and Titan's heroic takedown. It was exactly the kind of evidence that would solidify the case. As the sound of approaching sirens filled the air, Megan felt a sense of closure beginning to settle over the situation. But deep down, she knew this was only the beginning. The thief might be in custody, but ensuring the woman's safety would require vigilance and follow-up. The distant wail of sirens grew louder, a promise of resolution that brought some relief to the tense air. Megan remained standing firm, her hand resting lightly on Titan's harness. The woman, cradling her puppy Max, shifted nervously from foot to foot. The thief, however, had adopted an air of sullen silence, his earlier bravado completely gone. Megan glanced at the trembling woman, her soft tone cutting through the tension. "You're safe now," she assured her. "We'll handle the rest. But I'll need you to stay close to provide a statement." The woman nodded, clutching Max tighter. "I'll do whatever it takes to make sure he's held accountable," she said, her voice shaking but resolute. The thief let out a derisive snort from his seated position. "Accountable for what? It was just a stupid dog. You're all blowing this out of proportion," Titan growled low and deep, the sound cutting through the thief's words like a blade. Megan shot him a glare, her voice now sharp. "That stupid dog you're dismissing just so happens to be the center of someone's life. And your actions today prove you're a danger to more than just animals." The thief shrank back slightly but remained silent, his lips pressed into a thin line. Megan's radio crackled as the dispatcher confirmed backup was just moments away. She exhaled slowly, allowing herself a brief moment of calm. Titan's steady presence beside her provided the reassurance she needed. He seemed to sense her tension, leaning slightly against her leg. Turning to the woman, Megan softened her expression. "What's your name?" she asked. "It's Laura," the woman replied. "And this little guy is Max?" Megan smiled faintly, kneeling down to pet Max gently. "Max is a brave little pup," she said. "How you both are." Laura's eyes filled with gratitude. "I don't know what would have happened if you and Titan hadn't been here," she admitted. "I've been so scared for weeks, and I didn't know what to do. But seeing how you stood up to him, it gives me hope." Before Megan could respond, the backup units arrived, 2 patrol cars pulling up with flashing lights. Officers stepped out, their expressions a mix of focus and curiosity. One of them, Officer Daniels, approached Megan. "How you caught him?" he asked, nodding toward the thief. "With Titan's help," Megan replied, a hint of pride in her tone. "He's not just a thief. Laura here has been dealing with weeks of stalking and harassment from him." Daniels raised an eyebrow. "That changes things. We'll need to process him for more than just the theft." "Already gathered some evidence," Megan said, handing over the video from the bystander. "This will corroborate what Laura's been experiencing." Daniels gave a low whistle. "Looks like you've got everything wrapped up. Good work." The officers moved to take custody of the thief, who initially resisted but quickly relented under Titan's watchful gaze. "That dog's crazy," the man muttered as they hauled him to his feet. "No," Megan said firmly. "He's trained, disciplined, and smarter than you could imagine. You're just lucky he stopped when I told him to." The thief muttered something under his breath, but didn't dare meet Titan's eyes as he was escorted to the patrol car. Once he was secured, Daniels returned with a notepad addressing Laura. "We'll need a formal statement about everything. What led to today and any previous incidents." Laura hesitated, glancing at Megan, who gave her a reassuring nod. "I'll stay with you the whole time," Megan said. "You're not alone in this." With Megan's support, Laura began recounting her story, each detail painting a clearer picture of the escalating threat she had faced. From the seemingly coincidental encounters to the increasingly bold actions, it was evident that the thief had been calculating and persistent. As Laura spoke, Titan sat quietly beside her, his head resting on Megan's knee. Occasionally, he glanced up at her as if to check in, his calm presence grounding both Megan and Laura. Once the statement was complete, Daniels closed his notebook and offered Laura a kind smile. "You're brave for speaking up," he said. "We'll make sure this gets handled properly. Officer Reed and Titan will ensure your safety in the meantime." Laura managed a small smile, her hand brushing against Max's soft fur. "Thank you," she said, her voice steadier now. Megan rose, offering Laura her card. "If you feel unsafe at any point, call me. We'll also arrange for patrols near your home to ensure he doesn't come near you again." As the patrol cars drove off, taking the thief into custody, the park returned to an almost surreal calm. Megan turned to Laura, her expression serious but compassionate. "This isn't over," she said, "but you took a huge step today. You've got support now, and Max has someone watching over him, besides you, of course." Laura chuckled softly, finally relaxing a bit. "And Titan," she added, glancing at the dog. "He's amazing." Megan grinned, scratching behind Titan's ears. "He's the best partner I could ask for." As they parted ways, Megan watched Laura walk away. Max nestled securely in her arms. Titan stood at attention beside her, his tail wagging slightly. Megan placed a hand on his head, her voice soft. "Another job well done, boy," Titan barked once in response, his eyes shining with intelligence and loyalty. As Megan returned to her patrol car with Titan trotting obediently at her side, she couldn't shake a lingering feeling. Laura and Max were safe for now, but something about the thief's demeanor nagged at her. His casual dismissal of his actions, paired with his lack of fear even under arrest, hinted at something deeper. This wasn't a random act of desperation. It felt calculated. Titan jumped into his designated seat in the patrol car, his keen eyes scanning the surroundings as Megan started the engine. She tapped her fingers on the steering wheel, her mind racing. The thief's words played back in her head. "It was just a stupid dog." "Something's off about him, Titan," Megan muttered, glancing at her partner. Titan let out a low whine, as if in agreement. She sighed, deciding to follow her instincts. Instead of heading back to the station, she took a detour toward a nearby precinct where the thief would be booked. When Megan arrived, she found Officer Daniels finishing the paperwork for the arrest. He looked up as she entered, his brow furrowing. "Reed, everything okay?" he asked. "Not sure," Megan replied. "Mind if I sit in on the interview? I've got a hunch this guy isn't working alone." Daniels nodded, gesturing toward the interrogation room. "Be my guest. We haven't started yet. Figured we'd wait until he calmed down." Megan and Titan positioned themselves outside the one-way glass, observing the thief as he slouched in a metal chair. His posture was relaxed, almost defiant, but his eyes darted around the room, betraying his nerves. He was calculating, thinking ahead. Megan recognized that look. It wasn't his first time in trouble. Daniels entered the room with another officer, a recorder already running. "Name?" he asked. The thief smirked. "Paul," he said nonchalantly. "Full name?" Daniels pressed, his tone firm. "Paul Trenton," the thief replied, leaning back. "But you already know that." "Address? Why does it matter? You already have me locked up." Daniels shot him a sharp look. "It matters because we're building a case. The more you cooperate, the easier this goes for you." Paul shrugged, his expression smug. "Fine. 145 Birch Avenue." Megan's heart skipped a beat. Birch Avenue was a known hotspot for illegal dog trafficking operations. She exchanged a look with Titan, who let out a quiet but alert bark. Megan's instincts had been right. This wasn't a simple theft. Daniels leaned forward, his tone shifting. "So, Paul, what's a guy like you doing stealing puppies in a public park?" Paul's smirk widened. "People love their pets," he said with a shrug. "Easy money, that's all." "Just you?" Megan asked, stepping into the room. Paul's eyes flicked toward her, narrowing slightly. "And who are you?" he sneered. "Someone who's not buying your story," Megan said, crossing her arms. "You knew exactly where to find Laura and Max. That wasn't random, so who's pulling your strings?" Paul's confidence faltered for a split second, his jaw tightening. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said. Megan stepped closer, her voice low but firm. "Here's the thing, Paul. You can keep playing dumb or you can start talking. Because if I dig into Birch Avenue, I'm going to find a lot more than just you. And when I do, you'll wish you'd cooperated." Paul's smug facade cracked slightly. He shifted in his seat, avoiding her gaze. "I don't know anything about Birch Avenue," he muttered. Titan barked again, louder this time, startling Paul. Megan leaned down, locking eyes with him. "Titan doesn't like liars," she said, "and neither do I. You're in deeper than you realize. Help yourself out before it's too late." Paul hesitated, his fingers drumming on the table. Finally, he sighed. "Fine. Yeah, there's a group," he admitted reluctantly. "They've got this set up. Steal dogs, flip 'em for cash. Easy business and low risk." "And Max?" Megan asked. "Was he part of the plan or did you go rogue?" Paul looked away. "I was supposed to grab a different dog," he admitted. "Max was just there." Megan straightened, her mind racing. This wasn't just about Max or Laura. This was part of a larger operation. She turned to Daniels. "We need a team on Birch Avenue now. If he's telling the truth, there could be more dogs in danger." Daniels nodded, stepping out to make the call. Megan turned back to Paul, her expression steely. "Anything else we should know?" Paul shrugged. "You've got all I know. I just do what I'm told." Megan leaned in closer, her voice icy. "Then you're still as guilty as the rest of them." Leaving the room, Megan felt a mix of anger and determination. She knelt beside Titan, scratching his neck. "Looks like we've got more work to do, boy," she said softly. Titan wagged his tail, ready for action. As Megan drove toward Birch Avenue with Titan in the back seat, a storm of emotions churned within her. The gravity of the situation hit her harder with each passing second. This wasn't just about a stolen puppy. It was about an organized network preying on innocent animals and their trusting owners. For Megan, it had now become personal. Titan sensed the tension. He let out a low whine, resting his head on her shoulder from the back seat. Megan glanced at him in the rearview mirror and gave him a reassuring pat. "We'll get them, buddy," she murmured. "We'll make this right." The closer she got to Birch Avenue, the darker the city seemed to grow. The area was notorious for shady dealings, a place where people didn't ask questions as long as they got what they wanted. Megan parked a block away, blending her patrol car with other vehicles to avoid suspicion. She and Titan stepped out, her heart pounding. The plan was to wait for backup, but Megan's gut told her time was running out. The network wouldn't risk keeping the dogs in one place for long, not with someone in custody. She crouched beside Titan, scratching behind his ears. "Think you're ready for this?" she asked. Titan responded with a wag of his tail and a focused stare. As Megan approached the warehouse Paul had hinted at, she noticed the eerie silence. The building looked abandoned, with boarded-up windows and faded graffiti, yet faint sounds reached her ears. Dogs barking and whining, a heartbreaking cacophony that tightened her chest. Her radio crackled to life. "Reed, backup is en route. ETA 10 minutes, came Daniels's voice. 10 minutes might be too late, Megan whispered, keeping her voice low. "I'm going in." "Reed, wait, protocol says—" "I don't have time for protocol," she snapped, cutting off the transmission. Every second wasted could mean another animal lost forever. Megan and Titan crept closer, using the shadows for cover. As they reached the back entrance, Megan spotted a rusted metal door slightly ajar. She peeked inside, her pulse racing. The interior was dimly lit, with makeshift cages lining the walls. Inside were dozens of dogs of all breeds and sizes, their eyes filled with fear. Her gaze shifted to the center of the room, where two men were loading crates onto a truck. Their movements were rushed, their voices tense. "Paul should have kept his mouth shut," one of them growled. Now we've got to clear out before the cops show. Megan felt a surge of anger, but forced herself to stay calm. She signaled to Titan, who crouched low beside her. "Quiet and steady," she whispered. The plan was simple: disarm and delay until backup arrived. But as she stepped into the room, the floor creaked under her boot, and the men spun around. "Who the—" one started, reaching for something behind his back. "Police!" Megan barked, drawing her weapon. "Hands where I can see them." The men froze for a moment, exchanging a glance. Then, as if by unspoken agreement, one bolted toward the truck, while the other lunged at Megan. Before she could react, Titan leapt into action, snarling as he intercepted the attacker. The man yelped, stumbling backward and dropping a crowbar he'd been concealing. "Call him off!" the man shouted, his voice trembling as Titan stood his ground, teeth bared. "Not until you're on the floor, face down, hands behind your head," Megan ordered. The man hesitated but obeyed, lying flat with Titan growling inches from his face. The second man was already climbing into the truck, slamming the door shut. Megan cursed under her breath, holstering her weapon as she sprinted after the vehicle. It roared to life, tires screeching as it sped toward the exit. "Titan, stay!" she yelled, trusting her partner to guard the first suspect. Megan darted toward her patrol car, adrenaline coursing through her veins. As she started the engine, she caught sight of the truck swerving wildly down the narrow street. She flipped on the sirens and gave chase. The pursuit was tense, the truck barreling through intersections and narrowly missing pedestrians. Megan gripped the wheel tightly, her focus unyielding. In her rearview mirror, she saw other patrol cars joining the chase. Backup had finally arrived. The truck skidded around a corner, but the driver overcorrected, slamming into a row of parked cars. Megan pulled up behind it, jumping out with her weapon drawn. The driver stumbled from the cab, clutching his shoulder and glaring at her. "On the ground now!" Megan shouted. The man hesitated but complied, as officers from the backup units arrived, quickly taking him into custody. With both suspects apprehended, Megan's attention turned to the truck. She opened the back, her heart breaking at the sight inside, crates stacked haphazardly, each containing scared, trembling dogs. Some were injured, their paws raw and their fur matted. "It's okay," Megan whispered, her voice softening. "You're safe now." Titan, now by her side, whined softly, his nose pressed against the nearest crate. Megan reached out, gently stroking the muzzle of a golden retriever puppy that peered out with wide, frightened eyes. As the other officers began securing the scene, Megan knelt beside Titan, who was now nuzzling one of the smaller crates. She couldn't help but smile, despite the ache in her chest. "We did it, boy," she said. "They're going home." As the chaos of the scene began to settle, Megan took a moment to gather her thoughts. The dogs were being carefully removed from the truck, one, by animal control officers. Each whimper, bark, and wagging tail tugged at her heart, but she couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over. Titan sat by her side, his ears perked up, as if sensing her unease. Megan gave him a quick pat on the head. "Good work, buddy," she said softly, though her mind was racing. Something wasn't adding up. The suspects were being loaded into separate patrol cars, both of them glaring silently at the ground. Megan approached the first man, the one Titan had subdued earlier. She knelt to meet his eye level. "This operation is over," she said firmly. "You want to make this easier on yourself? Start talking." The man sneered. "You think this stops anything? You've got no idea what you're dealing with." Megan felt a chill run down her spine. "Try me," she challenged, her voice steady. He glanced at the other suspect, who was now shouting obscenities at the officers escorting him. Then, with a bitter laugh, he leaned closer to Megan. "You think this is about a few puppies? This is bigger than you, bigger than your little badge." Before Megan could press him further, the other man shouted, "Shut up, Greg. Don't say another word." Megan's instincts screamed that this wasn't just about stealing pets for quick money. There was an organization behind this, a network that thrived on secrecy and fear. She stood, looking at the officers nearby. "Get them both to the station. I'll need their full statements." As the patrol cars drove away, Megan turned her attention back to the truck. Something was gnawing at her. Why were the men so desperate to move the dogs in the middle of the night? Why Birch Avenue, a place notorious for illegal dealings? She approached the animal control officer, who was carefully examining the crates. "Anything unusual?" she asked. The officer nodded grimly, gesturing to one of the crates. "Take a look." Inside was a small black and white puppy, its fur patchy and its eyes filled with fear. Megan leaned in closer and noticed a tiny, unmarked envelope taped to the bottom of the crate. Her brow furrowed as she carefully peeled it off. Opening the envelope, she found a folded piece of paper with coordinates scribbled on it. Megan's heart skipped a beat. Why would there be coordinates hidden in a crate? And where did they lead? "Titan, heel," she commanded, her voice tightening with determination. Titan immediately moved to her side, his tail wagging slightly, but his eyes alert. Megan quickly snapped a photo of the note with her phone before slipping it into her pocket. She didn't have time to wait for backup or approvals. Every fiber of her being told her that this was the key to something much larger. She looked at the animal control officer. "Make sure these dogs are safe and get them medical attention. I'll be in touch." "Where are you going?" he asked, his tone laced with concern. "To find out just how deep this rabbit hole goes," she replied, her voice unwavering. The coordinates led to an industrial area on the outskirts of the city. The drive was tense, the streets growing quieter as she left the bustling downtown behind. Megan glanced at Titan in the rearview mirror. "I don't like this, buddy," she admitted, "but we need to know what's out there." The location marked by the coordinates turned out to be an old warehouse, its windows shattered and its walls covered in faded graffiti. Megan parked a safe distance away, scanning the area for any signs of activity. The place seemed abandoned, but she knew better than to trust appearances. As she stepped out of the car, Titan followed close behind, his ears swiveling to catch every sound. Megan drew her flashlight and approached cautiously, her footsteps silent against the cracked asphalt. The door to the warehouse hung slightly ajar, creaking softly in the wind. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the faint scent of oil. Broken machinery and crates were scattered across the floor, and the only light came from a few holes in the roof where moonlight streamed through. Megan's flashlight beam swept over the room, revealing a chilling sight. In the center of the space was a makeshift operating table, surrounded by empty dog cages. A metal tray nearby held surgical tools, some still stained with blood. Megan's stomach turned. This wasn't just a holding area for stolen pets. This was where the dogs were being exploited. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps. She quickly turned off her flashlight and crouched behind a stack of crates, her hand instinctively resting on Titan's head to keep him still. The footsteps grew louder, accompanied by hushed voices. "You think they're onto us?" one voice asked, nervous and shaky. "Doesn't matter," another replied, colder and more composed. "We've already moved the important ones. This place is a decoy now." Megan's grip on her flashlight tightened. She needed to act fast, but she couldn't risk being outnumbered. She whispered to Titan, "Stay quiet, boy, we'll catch them in the act." Megan stayed crouched, her breath steady, but her mind racing. Titan was motionless at her side, his intense gaze fixed on the direction of the voices. The men moved deeper into the warehouse, their footsteps echoing faintly in the cavernous space. "You hear about Greg and Eddie?" the first man asked, his voice still tinged with unease. "They got caught. Cops raided their spot tonight." "Doesn't matter," the second man replied, his tone dismissive. "They were sloppy. We're not. By the time anyone figures out this operation, we'll be long gone." Megan's stomach churned. The operation wasn't just about stealing dogs. It was part of a well-coordinated network. Whatever these men were up to, it went beyond anything she had initially imagined. As the men moved further into the warehouse, Megan gestured to Titan, silently signaling for him to stay close but ready. She crept forward, weaving through the maze of crates and debris. Her flashlight remained off, and her movements were calculated, her years of training guiding her. From her new vantage point, she could see the men more clearly. One was tall and wiry, with a baseball cap pulled low over his face. The other was shorter but stockier, his hands constantly fidgeting as if he couldn't stay still. They stopped near a set of stacked crates and began rummaging through one of the boxes. "Check for anything we left behind," the stocky man ordered. "We can't afford to leave traces this time." "What about the tracker collars?" the wiry man asked, pulling out a small electronic device from the box. "We've got all the data we need," the other replied, his voice cold. "Dump them. The last thing we need is for someone to trace them back here." Megan's pulse quickened. Tracker collars, were they using the stolen dogs for something more sinister? Her mind raced with possibilities, illegal experiments, smuggling, even fighting rings. The thought made her grip her flashlight tighter. Titan let out a low growl, so faint that only Megan could hear it. She placed a calming hand on his head, silently reassuring him. They had to time their move perfectly. The men continued talking, oblivious to Megan's presence. "You hear what happened with the Doberman?" the wiry man asked. The stocky man chuckled darkly. "Yeah, that beast was a fighter. Took down 3 others before it was finally put down." Megan's jaw clenched. The image of defenseless animals being forced into such cruelty ignited a fire in her. She couldn't wait any longer. She stepped out from behind the crates, her flashlight snapping on. "Freeze! Police!" she barked, her voice echoing through the warehouse. The 2 men whipped around, their faces a mix of shock and panic. The stocky man reached for something in his pocket, but Titan was faster. With a single command from Megan, "Titan, engage!" the dog launched forward, his powerful body slamming into the man and knocking him to the ground. The wiry man hesitated for a split second before bolting toward a side door. Megan didn't miss a beat. "Titan, hold," she ordered, knowing her partner had the stocky man under control. She took off after the other suspect, her adrenaline pumping. The wiry man was fast, but Megan's training and determination gave her the edge. She chased him through the dimly lit corridors of the warehouse, weaving around obstacles and broken machinery. The man reached for the door, but Megan was on him in an instant, tackling him to the ground. "Stay down," she shouted, pinning his arms behind his back. He struggled for a moment before going limp, realizing there was no escape. As she cuffed him, the sound of footsteps approached rapidly. 2 officers entered, having responded to Megan's earlier backup call. "Perfect timing," she said, breathing heavily. "Get this one secured." She returned to Titan, who was still holding the stocky man in place. "Release," she commanded, and Titan immediately stepped back, his tail wagging slightly as he looked up at Megan for approval. The stocky man groaned, his face pressed against the cold floor. "You don't know what you're messing with," he spat. Megan crouched next to him, her eyes cold and unyielding. "You're going to tell me everything. Who you work for, what you're doing with these dogs, all of it." He glared at her but said nothing, his lips pressed into a thin line. Megan stood and looked at the officers. "Get them out of here. We'll sort this out at the station." As the men were escorted away, Megan turned her attention back to the warehouse. The stack of crates the men had been searching through caught her eye. She approached cautiously, prying one of the boxes open. Inside were dozens of tracker collars, just as the men had mentioned, along with files and photos. Her heart sank as she flipped through the documents. Each one detailed a dog's breed, aged on, and a number marked market value. This wasn't just theft, this was trafficking, with animals treated as commodities. She held up one of the photos. It showed a golden retriever, eyes wide with fear, inside a crate. Written in the corner was a chilling note. "Shipment number 214, high priority." Megan's resolve hardened. This wasn't just a bust, it was the beginning of uncovering a larger, more dangerous network. She looked down at Titan, who sat patiently by her side, his loyalty unwavering. "Looks like we've got a lot more work to do, partner," she said softly. Megan stood in the center of the warehouse, the open crate of tracker collars and files spread out before her. The reality of the operation she'd stumbled upon was sinking in deeper with every piece of evidence she uncovered. Titan sat at her side, his ears perked up, as if he could sense the gravity of the situation. Her radio crackled to life, breaking the tense silence. "Megan, this is dispatch. Officers are en route to transport the suspects. Do you require additional units?" Megan pressed the button to respond, her tone firm. "Affirmative. We've uncovered evidence suggesting a larger trafficking operation. Requesting animal control units as well." "Copy that. Units are on the way." As she waited for reinforcements, Megan continued to sift through the documents. Most of the files contained chilling details about the stolen dogs, but one folder stood out. It was marked with a red X and labeled "Special Shipment." Her fingers trembled slightly as she opened it. Inside was a photograph of a large shipping container, its serial number scrawled in bold letters across the side. The accompanying documents detailed a planned departure for the following evening. The destination, an undisclosed location overseas. Megan's heart pounded. If this container left, the stolen dogs would disappear, likely never to be found again. She flipped through the pages, her eyes scanning for any clue that might help her stop the shipment. And then she found it, a dock location and a time, Pier 17, 11:30 p.m. "This is it," she whispered to herself. "We have a chance to shut this entire operation down." Titan let out a soft bark, pulling her attention away. She turned to see him sniffing around another crate, his movements purposeful. Megan approached cautiously and pried the lid open. Her stomach turned at the sight inside. Cages, leashes, and other equipment used to restrain animals. A low growl escaped Titan, his hackles rising. Megan placed a calming hand on his back. "I know, boy. They're not going to get away with this." Suddenly, the faint sound of movement reached her ears. She froze, her hand instinctively going to her holster. Titan's ears twitched, and he turned his head toward the sound. It was coming from the far end of the warehouse, where shadows loomed heavily. Megan crouched low, signaling Titan to stay. With her flashlight in one hand and her other on her weapon, she crept toward the source of the noise. The beam of light flickered across the stacks of crates, casting long, eerie shadows. As she rounded a corner, a figure darted out of sight. Megan's adrenaline spiked. "Stop! Police!" she shouted, her voice echoing through the warehouse. The figure didn't stop. Instead, they bolted toward a side exit, their footsteps pounding against the concrete floor. Megan broke into a sprint, Titan racing at her side. The chase was intense, the sound of their pursuit filling the cavernous space. The suspect reached the exit and threw the door open, disappearing into the night. Megan and Titan were close behind. Outside, the air was cold and damp, the faint mist from the nearby docks hanging in the air. The suspect weaved through the maze of shipping containers, their movements frantic and erratic. Megan kept her focus, her training kicking in as she calculated the best way to close the distance. "Titan, intercept," she commanded, pointing toward the suspect. With a burst of speed, Titan shot forward, his powerful legs propelling him toward the fleeing figure. The suspect glanced back, their eyes widening in terror as they saw the German shepherd closing in. They made a desperate attempt to change direction, but it was too late. Titan leaped, his body colliding with the suspect and knocking them to the ground. Megan was on them in an instant, her weapon drawn. "Stay down," she barked, her voice commanding. The suspect didn't resist, their hands going up in surrender. Megan quickly secured them with handcuffs, her breathing heavy from the chase. As she pulled them to their feet, she noticed something that made her blood run cold, a patch on their jacket bearing the same emblem she'd seen in the documents. "You're part of this operation," she said, her voice low and steady. "Who's behind it? Where are the dogs being taken?" The suspect smirked, their confidence unnerving. "You'll never stop it," they sneered. "This is bigger than you, bigger than your department." Megan's jaw tightened, but she refused to let their words shake her resolve. "We'll see about that." She marched the suspect back toward the warehouse, Titan trotting at her side. Reinforcements had arrived, and officers were already securing the scene and collecting evidence. Megan handed the suspect over, her mind still racing with the information she'd uncovered. As she briefed her team, she knew one thing for certain. The next 24 hours would be critical. The shipment at Pier 17 was their only chance to dismantle this operation and save the stolen dogs. She looked down at Titan, his eyes meeting hers with unwavering loyalty. "We've got a big night ahead of us, partner," she said. "But we're not letting them get away with this." Titan wagged his tail, his silent way of saying he was ready for whatever came next. The night air at Pier 17 was thick with tension. The docks were eerily quiet, save for the occasional creak of a crane or the distant call of seagulls. The glow of industrial lights cast long, wavering shadows across the shipping containers, stacked high like a labyrinth. Megan crouched low behind a stack of barrels, scanning the area with her binoculars. Titan lay beside her, his ears perked and his body tense, ready for action. Megan's backup was en route, but she couldn't afford to wait. According to the information she'd gathered, the traffickers were scheduled to load the dogs into the shipping container within the hour. If she didn't act swiftly, the animals would vanish across the ocean, and the operation would slip through her fingers. Through the binoculars, Megan spotted movement near the target container. 3 men dressed in dark clothing were unloading smaller crates from an unmarked van. Each crate was filled with frightened, whimpering dogs. Megan's grip on her radio tightened. "Dispatch, this is Officer Megan Carter. I have visual on the suspects at Pier 17. They're actively loading stolen dogs into a shipping container, requesting immediate support." "Copy that, Officer Carter," came the response. "Units are 5 minutes out. Hold your position." "Hold her position." Megan's jaw tightened. 5 minutes might as well be an eternity in a situation like this. She glanced down at Titan, who looked up at her with unwavering trust. They'd been through plenty together, and she knew he was ready. Still, she couldn't afford to rush in recklessly. She whispered into her radio again. "Do we have eyes in the sky? Any drone or aerial units?" "Negative," dispatch replied. "You're on your own until backup arrives." Megan's heart pounded. Her mind raced through her options. She needed to slow the traffickers down without putting the dogs or herself in unnecessary danger. Her eyes locked onto a forklift parked nearby, its key dangling from the ignition. "That'll do," she murmured. She signaled Titan to stay and moved swiftly and silently toward the forklift. The dock workers were preoccupied, their laughter carrying over the night as they worked. Megan climbed into the vehicle, her movements careful to avoid drawing attention. She turned the key and the engine roared to life. The men froze, their heads snapping toward the sound. Megan slammed the forklift into gear and barreled forward, the machine's headlights casting a harsh glare across the scene. The men shouted in confusion, scrambling to move out of the way as the forklift skidded to a halt in front of the shipping container. "Police! Get down on the ground!" Megan yelled, her weapon drawn. The men hesitated for a moment before scattering in different directions. 2 sprinted toward the van, while the third ducked behind a stack of crates. Megan's radio crackled to life again. "Officer Carter, units are 2 minutes out." "I don't have 2 minutes," she muttered under her breath. Titan sprang into action, following Megan's command. "Titan, intercept!" she shouted, pointing toward the man fleeing to the van. Titan closed the distance in seconds, leaping onto the suspect and pinning him to the ground. The man let out a startled yell as Titan growled, his powerful presence enough to ensure compliance. The other 2 suspects reached the van and jumped inside. The engine roared to life, and the tires screeched as they attempted to flee. Megan raised her weapon, aiming for the van's tires. She fired twice, the shots echoing through the dock. One of the tires exploded, sending the van skidding sideways into a pile of pallets. The third man, who had been hiding, saw his chance and bolted toward the shipping container. Megan chased after him, her boots pounding against the concrete. The man climbed onto the container, trying to escape through the maze of stacked cargo. Megan followed, her breath steady, despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "Stop! You're only making it worse for yourself!" she shouted. The man ignored her, scrambling higher. Megan climbed after him, the gap between them closing. When she reached the top, he turned, swinging a crowbar in a wide arc. Megan ducked, the metal whistling past her head. She lunged forward, grabbing his arm and twisting it behind his back. The crowbar clattered to the ground as the man let out a grunt of pain. "Game over," Megan said, cuffing him swiftly. As she led the suspect back down, flashing blue and red lights filled the dock. The cavalry had arrived. Officers swarmed the area, securing the scene and rounding up the suspects. Animal control units moved in to rescue the dogs, their whimpers turning to excited barks as they were freed from their cages. Megan stood by Titan, watching as the operation was dismantled piece by piece. Her heart swelled with pride as she patted his head. "We did it, boy," she said softly. Titan wagged his tail, his job well done. But Megan's work wasn't over yet. In her hands, she still held the folder marked Special Shipment. She knew this wasn't the end of the story, just the beginning of unraveling something much larger. The dock, once buzzing with chaos, had settled into a tense calm. Officers moved with precision, securing the scene and collecting evidence, while animal control gently coaxed the rescued dogs into waiting vans. The air still carried the faint whimpers and barks of the dogs, but now it was mingled with the reassuring voices of rescue workers. Megan stood beside Titan, her heart still racing despite the apparent resolution. The folder in her hand felt heavier now, the words "Special Shipment" staring back at her like a taunt. Something about this operation didn't sit right. The sheer number of dogs, the meticulous organization. It felt too big to be a one-time act. "Carter!" a voice called, pulling her from her thoughts, Sergeant Daniels, her commanding officer, approached, his brow furrowed with concern. "Are you all right?" Megan nodded, though her mind was elsewhere. "Yeah, I'm fine. Titan's fine. But there's something bigger here, Sarge." Daniels raised an eyebrow, his gaze dropping to the folder she clutched. "What's that?" Megan handed it over, flipping it open to reveal the detailed manifests inside. This wasn't just a local operation. Look at these records: shipment dates, destinations, contacts overseas. This is organized, Sarge. It's not just about these dogs. There are more out there, and this is just one piece of the puzzle. Daniels scanned the papers, his expression growing graver with each page. "You're telling me this is international?" Megan nodded firmly. "That's exactly what I'm saying. They're moving these animals out of the country, probably for illegal breeding rings, fighting circuits, or worse. If we don't act fast, we'll lose them." Daniels let out a low whistle, closing the folder with a snap. "I'll escalate this to the task force. You've done good work tonight, Carter. Go home, get some rest. Titan, too, you've earned it." But Megan couldn't rest. Not yet. She looked down at Titan, who met her gaze with his steady, loyal eyes. He was tired. She could see it in the way his shoulders sagged. But there was still fire in his spirit. Together they had stopped this shipment, but the fight was far from over. Back at the station, Megan reviewed the evidence under harsh fluorescent lights. The more she pieced together, the clearer the picture became. A sprawling network that stretched across state lines and beyond. Each detail added weight to her growing conviction. She couldn't let this go. Titan lay at her feet, his head resting on his paws but his ears flicking at every sound. Even in rest, he was alert, as if sensing Megan's determination. A knock at the door startled her. She looked up to see Daniels again, holding a steaming cup of coffee. "Thought you'd still be here," he said, setting the cup on her desk. "You really don't know how to switch off, do you?" Megan managed a tired smile. "Not when there's more work to do." Daniels sighed, sitting across from her. "You've got that look in your eye, Carter. What's your plan?" Megan hesitated. "I want to go after them. Not just the small fish we caught tonight, the whole operation. But I need resources, time, and a team." Daniels rubbed his chin, considering her words. "It's risky. You know that, right? These kinds of networks don't go down easy. You'll be walking into a lion's den." "I know," Megan said, her voice steady. "But we have to try. For the dogs, for the people who care about them, and for the ones who can't fight for themselves." Daniels studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, I'll talk to the brass. If anyone can pull this off, it's you and Titan." As dawn broke over the city, Megan stepped outside the station, Titan trotting beside her. The first light of morning painted the streets in soft hues of gold and pink, a stark contrast to the events of the night. She paused, looking down at Titan with a tired but resolute smile. "We're not done yet, boy," she said, scratching behind his ears. Titan wagged his tail, his eyes shining with the same determination that fueled her. Somewhere out there, others like Titan were waiting for someone to notice, to care, to fight for them. Megan knew the road ahead would be long and filled with challenges, but she also knew one thing for certain. She and Titan wouldn't stop until the fight was won. As they walked toward her car, Megan felt a sense of purpose settle over her. This wasn't just another case. It was a mission, one she wouldn't back down from, no matter the cost. The morning sun cast its warm glow across the city as Megan drove home, the rhythmic hum of the car blending with the faint snoring of Titan in the back seat. For the first time in hours, Megan allowed herself to breathe deeply, the weight of the night slowly easing from her shoulders. But even as the immediate tension subsided, she knew the fight was far from over. In her mind, the images from the night played on a loop, the terrified eyes of the puppies, the heartless smirk of the man who had tried to steal one, and the tangled web of corruption hinted at by the folder she'd uncovered. Each memory strengthened her resolve. This wasn't just about stopping one act of cruelty. It was about dismantling an entire system of exploitation. As she pulled into her driveway, Megan glanced back at Titan, who stirred and stretched, his large paws pressing against the back seat. He yawned widely, his jaw stretching open before he fixed his intelligent eyes on her. "We're home," she said softly. "You did good, buddy. Real good." Inside, Titan immediately flopped onto his bed, letting out a contented sigh. Megan smiled. watching him for a moment before turning to her laptop. There was still work to do, reports to file, calls to make, and plans to set in motion. But first, she opened a blank document and began to type, pouring her thoughts into a heartfelt post that she planned to share with her community. Last night, Titan and I faced something I hope no one ever has to witness. A blatant act of cruelty that could have ended in tragedy, but thanks to quick action, courage, and a lot of teamwork, we stopped it. What we uncovered was bigger than just one crime. It was a glimpse into a larger network that profits off the pain and suffering of innocent animals. This isn't just about one dog or one night. It's about a system that thrives in the shadows, relying on the silence of those who see it happening. I'm sharing this because I believe in the power of awareness. If you see something wrong, speak up. If you can, take action. Whether it's helping an animal in need, reporting suspicious activity, or supporting organizations fighting against cruelty, every effort makes a difference. And to those who stood by Titan and me last night, thank you. Together, we can be the voice for those who don't have one. As Megan hit post, she felt a sense of relief. Sharing the story wasn't just about raising awareness. It was a promise to herself and the animals she fought for. She wouldn't stop until she made a real difference. Their soft whine drew her attention, and she turned to see Titan sitting by the door, his tail thumping lazily against the floor. Megan chuckled, rising to open the door and let him out into the yard. The sun was fully up now, casting a warm, golden light over the grass. Titan trotted off, sniffing at the air and wagging his tail. Megan watched him for a moment, her heart swelling with pride and gratitude. Titan wasn't just her partner, he was her inspiration. His unwavering loyalty, courage, and determination reminded her why she did what she did. Later that day, Megan received a call from Sergeant Daniels. "The task force is on board," he said. "We're pulling resources together, and I want you leading the charge." "You're the one who saw the bigger picture here." Megan's heart leapt. "Thank you, Sarge. Titan and I are ready." "You've earned this, Carter. Just be careful. This isn't going to be easy." "Nothing worth doing ever is," Megan replied. Over the next weeks, Megan and Titan dove headfirst into the investigation. Each day brought new leads, new challenges, and new victories. Slowly but surely, the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, revealing a network far more extensive than they'd imagined. Through it all, Megan kept the community updated, sharing stories of rescues and progress, as well as calls to action. The response was overwhelming. People from all walks of life reached out, offering support, tips, and donations. The fight against animal cruelty wasn't just hers, it belonged to everyone who cared. Over the next weeks, Megan and Titan dove headfirst into the investigation. Each day brought new leads, new challenges, and new victories. Slowly but surely, the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, revealing a network far more extensive than they'd imagined. Through it all, Megan kept the community updated, sharing stories of rescues and progress, as well as calls to action. The response was overwhelming. People from all walks of life reached out, offering support, tips, and donations. The fight against animal cruelty wasn't just hers. It belonged to everyone who cared. The story of Megan and Titan's heroics didn't end there. Their actions sparked a wave of awareness and change, inspiring countless others to stand up for what was right. The bond between Megan and Titan became a symbol of what was possible when humans and animals worked together for a greater cause. And for Megan, it wasn't just a mission. It was a calling, one she would carry with her for the rest of her life. If this story moved you, remember that every small action can make a big difference. Stand up against cruelty, support rescue organizations, and be a voice for those who can't speak for themselves. Together, we can create a kinder, safer world for all beings. Don't forget to subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your stories of courage and compassion. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.